Footprints in the snow. The wind shrieked through the pine trees like a wounded animal, its cries slicing the white-capped stillness of Everhollow, a remote mountain town tucked into Montana's northern wilds. Snow had fallen for days without pause, blanketing cabins, roads, and trails in a relentless storm that rendered the world white and still. It was the kind of winter that silenced even memory, muffling grief and hope alike beneath its heavy drifts. In a small cedar cabin at the edge of a frozen clearing, nestled beyond where the snowplows gave up and wilderness reclaimed the path, a man named Elijah Davis stirred a pot of soup over the fire. He moved with the quiet precision of someone long practiced in solitude. His hands were wide, work-worn, and sure, their every movement a language written by years of survival and silence. Outside, the blizzard howled, trying to claw through the wooden walls, but Elijah didn't flinch. He was used to storms outside and in. Once he'd been a city firefighter, a husband, a father. But all that had collapsed 3 winters ago when an avalanche crushed the curve outside Elk Ridge Pass. His wife, Simone, and their daughter, 9-year-old Liana, had been driving back from Holiday Market. The mountain took them both in a breath. Afterwards, Elijah walked away from everything that hurt to be near. He bought this land with the payout from their lives, cleared the trees with his own hands, and built a place far from the sound of sirens or pity. Now, the only noise was firewood cracking, the hum of an old transistor radio, and the occasional caw of crows. That afternoon, as the snowstorm hit its crescendo, Elijah was ladling soup into a chipped ceramic bowl when he noticed movement through the foggy window. At first, it seemed like a trick of the storm shadows shifting in the swirling white. But when he wiped the glass clean with his sleeve, he saw them. 2 small sets of footprints, side by side, leading from the woods to the lake, and none coming back. He was out the door before the thought fully formed. The air hit like a hammer, bitter, sharp, and punishing. He pulled his coat tight and followed the tracks. They were fresh, no snow had yet filled them, and Nan they led straight out onto the frozen lake. A lake that didn't freeze this early. Elijah's breath turned ragged as he sprinted, his boots punching through layers of soft powder. The prince stopped near the middle of the lake, abruptly, like something had swallowed the children whole. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the ice. At first, he heard nothing but the eerie creaks of stressed ice and wind. Then came a faint cry, high-pitched, garbled by water and fear. Without hesitation, Elijah struck the ice with his elbow, again and again, his bones aching as cracks split across the surface like shattered glass. On the 4th blow, it broke. The lake opened its jaws with a roar and pulled him into the dark. The cold was feral. It bit through flesh and memory, turned lungs to stone. But Elijah didn't panic. He reached through the freezing void, eyes wide, heart burning. Then fingers, small, frantic. He gripped one wrist, then another, and with a growl of effort, he hauled both bodies upward through the hole up onto the edge. 2 little girls, drenched, wide-eyed, and clinging to each other. He gathered them in his arms and began the long trudge back, his soaked clothes turning rigid as ice. Neither girl spoke, and Elijah didn't waste breath on questions. Survival was all that mattered. 1 foot after the other through the blinding storm, until his cabin came into view, soft light behind snow-streaked windows, the promise of warmth. He burst through the door and laid them beside the fire, unwrapped their wet clothes, wrapped them in blankets his old wool coat, a faded Afghan Simone once knit, anything that held heat. He boiled water, poured it into mugs, stirred in the last of his honey rations. He placed the mugs near their small hands, not pushing, just offering. Trust came slowly like thawing limbs. The older girl, 6, maybe 7, watched him in silence. Her lips were blue, her eyes wide, but not yet ready to cry. Her sister, younger by a few years, huddled beneath her arm, trembling. Elijah fed the fire. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the hiss of wood and the whimper of wind. At dawn, as gray light softened the edges of the storm, the older girl finally whispered, "My name's Clara." Elijah nodded. I'm Elijah, he said gently. And your sister? Ivy. He offered them soup, slow and careful. They drank in tiny sips, eyes still wary. But they were alive. Pink returned to their cheeks. Breath came steadier. Sleep followed soon after. It wasn't until the sun burned faint gold on the horizon that he asked, "Where were you before the lake?" Clara hesitated, then said the big glass house, with stairs that glowed. Elijah frowned. That didn't sound like any home in Everhollow. Then he remembered. A luxury resort had opened a few miles deep in the woods. A billionaire's retreat for tech elites and celebrities who wanted authentic wilderness with 5-star amenities. "You there with your parents?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "Just Mommy." She was on the phone. "We got bored. The snow looked fun. We wanted to skate," Ivy mumbled. Elijah's chest tightened. He moved to the shelf, grabbed his radio, and tuned it through static. A voice cut through. Breaking update. Clara and Ivy Bellamy, daughters of tech magnate Charlotte Bellamy, reported missing late yesterday afternoon near Aspen Haven Resort. Rescue efforts suspended overnight due to whiteout conditions. Charlotte Bellamy, a billionaire, a woman Elijah had once seen giving a speech about cybersecurity on an old TV in a diner. Her daughters curled beside his fire, saved from the lake by a man she'd never meet. Until she did. When Elijah pulled up to the gates of Aspen Haven later that morning with the girls bundled in flannel, scarves, and hope, the scene was chaos. Drones buzzed above. Guards paced with radios. But all sound stopped when a woman sprinted barefoot through the snow. Charlotte Bellamy didn't look like the magazine covers. Her face was raw with grief, hair tangled, coat unbuttoned. She collapsed in the snow with a cry when she saw her children. They ran to her, screamed "Mommy," and threw themselves into her arms. Elijah stood back, letting the moment bloom around him. He didn't need thanks, didn't need anyone to know. But Charlotte approached anyway, her voice cracking. You brought them back." Elijah just tipped his head. "You were alone," she whispered. "No drones. No dogs. Just you. How did you find them?" "I saw footprints," he replied. "And no footprints coming back. Sometimes that's enough." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "You saved my world." He didn't answer, just turned and drove back through the snow. Back to his quiet. Back to the picture frame on the window ledge and the fire now dimmed. But the silence in his cabin had changed. It wasn't just solitude Anna Maria was something touched. Clara's hand had once rested on the armrest. Ivy had laughed once, just once, when the kettle whistled too loud. Their warmth lingered. 3 days later, Charlotte returned. This time in a black SUV. No entourage. Just her. Clara remembered the mailbox number. "I came to say thank you," she said on his porch. "But I also came to offer something." She pulled an envelope from her coat. "You don't owe me anything," Elijah said before she could hand it over. "Maybe," she said softly, "it's not about owing. Maybe it's about honoring." She spoke about building safety stations, heated posts around the lake with emergency beacons, named in his honor. He shook his head. "Do it for them, not for me." She smiled, eyes wet. "Then let's call it that. For the girls." The next week, workers arrived. Quiet. Efficient. They rebuilt his front steps. Re-insulated the cabin. Installed double-pane windows. But it was the plaque that caught Elijah's breath. "This home stands because one man saw footprints and chose to follow." Later, a letter arrived. From Charlotte. "Elijah, you told me not to owe you, so I won't pretend this is payment. This is legacy. We've launched a winter initiative in your name 5 safety stations around the lake. Not for press, not for glory, just because it's right. Thank you for reminding me what that means. Charlotte." Elijah folded the letter and tucked it into Simone's Bible on the mantel. Soon, the safety stations appeared: solar lights, first aid kits, emergency blankets. One bore a bench with the words, "Someone saw. Someone came. Locals noticia." Someone left fresh honey. Another left kindling. A boy delivered a bundle with a note. "Thanks for the girls." One day, Elijah found drawings on his porch. Stick figures. A cabin. 2 girls. 1 man. Above them, Clara and Ivy. Below him, our snow hero. He pinned them on the wall beside his family photo. And somehow it fit. The lake froze again, but not dangerously. Lights from the safety stations glowed like watchful eyes. Elijah stood at the window, holding his mug, gazing into the night. He didn't believe in fate, but he believed in action. He'd followed the footprints, and now the world was changed. When spring finally came, the snow retreated slowly. At the lake's edge, a dedication was held. No press, just people, neighbors, survivors. Clara and Ivy sat beside Elijah. Charlotte spoke simply. He didn't know us, but he saw the signs. He acted. And because of that, my daughters are alive. This bench, these shelters theory, not about wealth or power. They're about one man who did the right thing. Not for praise, just because it was right. Elijah bowed his head. And from that day forward, when someone sat at that bench, they didn't talk about storms or wealth. They talked about the man who saw footprints and walked into the snow.